Melbourne, Australia, a city of culture and arts where countless stories unfold each day across its sprawling landscapes and quiet parks. Home to roughly 5 million people, this vibrant metropolis is known for its famous landmarks and thriving arts scene. On a mild June evening in 2018, one story would begin that would deeply affect the entire community. In this bustling city lived a young woman named Eurydice Jane Dixon, born on the 10th of November, 1995. Those who knew her described Eurydice as gutsy, determined, and clever, a person who showed kindness to everyone she encountered and possessed a genuine passion for the arts. Life hadn't always followed an easy path for Eurydice. When she was just 7 years old, tragedy entered her young life when her mother, who had struggled with heroin addiction, passed away from an overdose at a shopping center. Throughout these early difficulties, Eurydice maintained strong connections with her family. She shared a close bond with her siblings, her brother Christopher and her sister Polly, as well as with her father Jeremy. These relationships provided stability and support as she navigated her way through childhood and adolescence without her mother's presence. Those who observed Eurydice as she grew older often remarked that she possessed the natural qualities of a born performer. As a young adult, she began developing a career in stand-up comedy, gradually establishing herself as a formidable and unique voice on Melbourne's comedy circuit. Although naturally more introverted in her personal life, Eurydice began to blossom on stage, channeling her intelligence and life experiences into thoughtful comedy routines that resonated with audiences. Her comedy reflected her values and perspective on the world. Known as a staunch feminist, Eurydice nevertheless possessed the ability to poke gentle fun at herself and her own ideas, showing a self-awareness that enriched her performances. Social issues frequently appeared in her material, presented through her distinctive viewpoint and intelligent analysis. Fellow comedians found her incredibly supportive, with one describing her as a comic's best friend. Even when jokes didn't land exactly as intended, Eurydice could always find humor in the situation and continue with grace. Performing regularly at various comedy clubs around Melbourne, she was steadily building a reputation in the local comedy scene, recognized for her original voice and perspective. On Tuesday, the 12th of June, 2018, Eurydice performed a set at the Highlander Bar, a venue she often visited to try new material. That evening, her performance was particularly well received by the audience. Those who saw her that night later described her as feeling elated by the positive reception of her new material, noting that she seemed on top of the world because of how well her set had been received. After her performance concluded, she left the club and walked with her boyfriend Tony, accompanying him to his tram, before beginning her own journey home, a route she had traveled many times before. As Eurydice approached Prince's Park, she followed her usual routine of removing her shoes to walk barefoot across the grass, moving from west to east through the park she loved. This was something she did every time her path took her through this green space. At 12:02 a.m. on Wednesday, the 13th of June, when she was merely a few hundred meters from her home, she sent a message to Tony. "I'm almost home safe. How about you?" She continued her walk across 2 football pitches and then onto a third, drawing ever closer to the house she shared with her brother and father. At 2:40 a.m., a passerby making his way home from work made a distressing discovery on one of the fields at Prince's Park Sporting Precinct. Upon finding a body lying on the ground, he immediately contacted emergency services and began performing CPR while waiting for their arrival. Paramedics were quickly dispatched to the scene, but despite the best efforts of both the passerby and the medical professionals, they were unable to revive the young woman. Eurydice Dixon was pronounced deceased at the scene. Authorities promptly cordoned off the area, and a murder investigation was launched. Detective Inspector Andrew Stamper requested that anyone who had been in the vicinity between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m. come forward, as they might have observed something of significance that could assist with the investigation. Police asked local residents and businesses to check any dashcam footage or CCTV recordings that might help create a clearer picture of what had transpired during those hours. As the investigation proceeded, a post-mortem examination revealed that Eurydice had died as a result of asphyxiation and compression to the neck. The medical examiner also noted that her body showed signs of blunt force injuries across her head and torso, indicating a violent assault had taken place before her death. The news of Eurydice's tragic passing resonated deeply with the Melbourne community and beyond. Nearly 10,000 people gathered at Melbourne Park for a vigil in her memory, showing the profound impact her death had on both those who knew her and those who recognized the broader implications of the violence that had claimed her life. At 6 p.m., the park's lights were dimmed and the space was illuminated only by the soft glow of candles held by those in attendance. Among those present were people who had previously attended similar vigils following the murder of Jill Mager in 2012. Another case where a woman was killed by a stranger while walking home. This somber connection highlighted a pattern of violence that many found deeply troubling. Premier Daniel Andrews attended with his wife Catherine, describing Eurydice's murder as a terrible, terrible tragedy and such a waste, such a senseless, thoughtless, evil act. As the gathering concluded, a choir performed Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah, the gentle notes floating through the evening air, creating a moment of collective mourning and reflection. The state government used the opportunity to speak about the need for community attitudes toward women to change. Officials emphasized that the vigil was not only about expressing grief, but also about demanding changes in terms of the way women are seen and treated in our community. This call for societal transformation echoed through conversations in the days and weeks that followed. The following Monday morning brought additional distress when local residents discovered that Eurydice's memorial had been vandalized with inappropriate imagery, causing outrage throughout the community. Many expressed their dismay at this disrespectful act, with one person commenting, "Low, it's lower than low. It's the absolute pits. It's absolutely disgusting. They should just be lifted up to dry." The vandalism struck many as a particularly cruel gesture directed at a community already in mourning. Hours after this discovery, Victoria's Police Chief Commissioner, Graham Ashton, visited the site to add to the growing memorial and pledged to bring those responsible for both the vandalism and Eurydice's death to justice. He described the crime as terrible and shocking, assuring the public that authorities would work diligently to resolve both matters. In the days that followed, several buildings across Australia, including Melbourne's Town Hall, were illuminated with orange lights, the color used by the United Nations to represent efforts to end violence against women and girls. This visual symbol of solidarity reinforced the community's commitment to addressing the underlying issues that contribute to gender-based violence. Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull addressed Parliament regarding Eurydice's death, saying, "Our hearts go out to Eurydice's family, our prayers, our sympathy, our love with them as they grieve her loss. Women must be safe everywhere on the street, walking through a park, in their homes, at work." He continued emphasizing the broader cultural context. We need to ensure that we have a culture of respect for women. Not all disrespect of women ends up in violence against women, but that's where all violence against women begins. The Prime Minister acknowledged that this was not a partisan issue, but a heartbreaking tragedy that united all members in saying, "We must never, ever, ever tolerate violence against women." Eurydice Dixon, we mourn her loss, we grieve with her family, and we say never again. These words reflected a political consensus around the gravity of the situation and the need for change. Meanwhile, the police investigation continued, eventually leading authorities to a young man named James Todd. While in custody at Broadmeadows Police Station, the events of June 12th and 13th became clearer as investigators pieced together his movements on the day of Eurydice's murder. On that Tuesday, Todd had finished his hospitality classes around 3 o'clock in the afternoon and taken a train into the city with 3 classmates. After an unsuccessful attempt to purchase alcohol without identification at one store, he bought vodka and cigarette rolling papers at another location. He and his friends spent time drinking at Batman Park before one friend decided to head home. Todd then purchased cider and later acquired marijuana from individuals in the park. At approximately 8:30 p.m., the group went to Southern Cross Station, where Todd bought whiskey before boarding a train toward Broadmeadows. One of his companions got off at Flinders Street, while Todd disembarked at Newmarket. There, he purchased tobacco before returning to the city, arriving at Flinders Street Station at 10:25 p.m. He proceeded to Elizabeth Street, passing a Woolworths where Eurydice was with Tony at 10:43 p.m. Todd continued to McDonald's for a meal, then walked back to the intersection of Swanston and Flinders, where he observed Eurydice saying goodbye to Tony as he boarded his tram. Standing outside the Young and Jackson Hotel, Todd initially decided to return to the station, but then noticed Eurydice walking alone. At 11:08 p.m., he allowed her to pass by him, then began following her, carefully concealing himself and remaining out of her line of sight. He slowed his pace when she did and hid behind objects along the route, ensuring she remained unaware of his presence. After Eurydice removed her shoes to walk across the park, Todd approached her from behind, grabbing her by her dress and hair before forcing her to the ground. Though Eurydice fought back with considerable effort, scratching his face repeatedly in her attempt to escape, Todd overpowered her. After assaulting her, he strangled her for what he later estimated to be between 5 and 10 minutes. Following the attack, Todd used the front-facing camera on Eurydice's phone to examine the scratches on his face for approximately 10 minutes, showing a disturbing level of self-concern in the aftermath of his violent actions. He then went to Royal Park Station, where he fell asleep on a bench at 2:14 a.m. At 3:55 a.m., he walked back through Prince's Park, where he defecated on one of the tracks. He then walked over to where he had left Eurydice's body, but was instructed to leave the area by police officers who had by then arrived at the scene. At 5:50 a.m., Todd boarded a train home, arriving at his bedroom by 6:37 a.m. He used his iPad to search for information about Prince's Park and read news articles reporting that a woman's body had been discovered there in the early morning hours. He then conducted internet searches for content relating to rape and strangulation, suggesting a continued interest in violent sexual content even after committing the murder. At 6:34 p.m. that evening, Todd received a call from a friend who had seen his photograph on the news as someone police wished to speak with in connection to the crime. Todd searched for the number of the local police station before calling to identify himself as the person in the photograph. His girlfriend and her mother accompanied him to the station where his mother was waiting. Before entering, he assured his girlfriend she had nothing to worry about, providing her with false reassurance about the situation. During questioning, Todd confessed to what he had done, telling officers, "She looked like she was stumbling around. She looked like she was not in a position to defend herself." This statement revealed his predatory mindset and deliberate targeting of someone he perceived as vulnerable. Todd was subsequently charged with the rape and murder of Eurydice Dixon. In a later phone call to his father from prison, Todd expressed disappointment about how the murder had panned out, saying he felt like shit after and hoped the next time would be better. These chilling comments revealed a disturbing lack of remorse and suggested an intention to commit similar crimes in the future, a fact that would later influence sentencing decisions. As investigators examined Todd's background, they uncovered disturbing details about his upbringing and psychological profile. He was the middle of three boys raised in what was described as a neglectful and unsanitary home environment. The kitchen floor had rotted to the point of partial collapse, the toilet was non-functional, and every room contained accumulated garbage and rubbish. Several animals also lived in the home, contributing to the unsanitary conditions. When asked if his mother's depression had contributed to these conditions, Todd responded that the house had always been like this, suggesting a long-term pattern of neglect and dysfunction. Todd had been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder at a young age. In his childhood, he exhibited repetitive behaviors and intense focus on specific interests, such as dinosaurs. At age 12, his school referred him to mental health services due to concerns about his emotional well-being and social interactions. During his teenage years, he received treatment to help regulate his emotions, particularly anger. He gradually spent less time at his family home, occasionally sleeping on the streets, and eventually asked to move in with his girlfriend, staying with her on weekends. While in custody, Todd was diagnosed with sexual sadism disorder. Professor James Ogloff, a forensic psychologist with over 35 years of experience studying pedophiles, murderers, and rapists, later examined Todd and commented on this diagnosis to the media. He explained that the development of this disorder is not entirely understood, but is extremely rare. Ogloff noted, "We don't know why this occurs, but we do know there are people like him whose sexual interests appear to be best satisfied by inflicting pain and ultimately ending the life of someone. It is not driven by their hatred of women. It is a sexual interest. The public wants a simple answer, but there is no quick fix." This expert assessment helped contextualize Todd's actions within a recognized psychological framework, though it certainly did not excuse or mitigate the severity of his crimes. Todd's internet search history revealed that from approximately age 11, he had accessed increasingly violent pornographic content, including searches for snuff films, violent sexual encounters resulting in death. Reports indicated he had harbored fantasies about sexual assault and murder from an early age, suggesting a long-term development of his violent sexual interests. On Thursday, June 28th, Eurydice Dixon's funeral was held. Her uncle's sister and former drama teacher were among those who spoke at the service, which included Johnny Cash's "We'll Meet Again" and The Cure's "Pictures of You" as musical selections that reflected her personality and tastes. Friend Kieran Butler offered a moving tribute describing Eurydice as having the mind of a lawyer, able to approach issues from multiple perspectives and genuinely understand viewpoints she disagreed with. Butler elaborated, "She was someone who could attack an issue or idea from polar opposite sides. She could genuinely empathize with and understand a point of view or action that she vehemently disagreed with. This capacity for understanding diverse perspectives was part of what made her comedy so insightful and her friendships so meaningful." The emotional service provided a fitting tribute to Eurydice's life and character, celebrating the person she was rather than focusing solely on the tragic circumstances of her death. Authorities eventually identified and apprehended the individual responsible for vandalizing Eurydice's memorial. Andrew Nolch, 29, pleaded guilty to painting offensive imagery at the site days after her death. He claimed his actions were motivated by what he perceived as man-hating and stated he wanted to make a statement for men's rights. In his own words, "Blatant man-hating upset me so much that I thought I had to make a statement for men's rights." Though he insisted he meant no offense to Eurydice specifically, he acknowledged intending to cause maximum outrage with his actions. The court sentenced Nolch to 200 hours of community service, required him to undergo a men's behavior change program, provide a DNA sample, and pay nearly $20,000 for cleanup costs. After violating his bail conditions by missing work shifts and traveling abroad, he received a 5-month prison sentence. On Thursday, June 14th, James Todd appeared in Melbourne Magistrates Court. His lawyer initially requested that Todd not be identified, citing his autism spectrum disorder diagnosis and concerns about his safety in custody. The attorney also argued that due to the high-profile nature of the case, identifying Todd might make it more difficult to obtain reliable witness statements. The magistrate ruled that while Todd's face would be protected from publication, his identity would not be concealed. No bail application was submitted, and he was remanded in custody. On November 8, 2018, despite previously denying any involvement in the murder of Eurydice Dixon, Todd pleaded guilty to 4 charges: murder, rape, attempted rape, and sexual assault. The court proceedings that followed revealed more details about the case and Todd's psychological state. The court heard testimony from psychological experts regarding his sexual sadism disorder. Dr. David Thomas, testifying for the defense, stated that Todd presented a significant risk of reoffending if released. During assessment interviews, Todd had admitted knowing he would sexually assault someone as soon as he entered the park that night, though he claimed he hadn't decided to strangle Eurydice until the attack was underway. The court also heard that Todd had previously strangled a sexual partner during consensual activity, but had stopped when asked to do so. Dr. Thomas noted this had occurred early in the relationship, before Todd began consuming the type of violent content he accessed in the months preceding the offense against Eurydice. Senior Crown Prosecutor Dr. Nanette Rogers argued this demonstrated Todd's awareness that choking could cause harm, indicating he understood the dangerous nature of his actions. Defense barrister Tim Marsh maintained that Todd had not planned to murder Eurydice until after initiating the attack, suggesting a degree of spontaneity rather than premeditation in the killing specifically, though not in the attack itself. Todd's girlfriend and female friends testified that despite his dysfunctional upbringing, he had consistently been respectful toward women in his personal relationships. His girlfriend described him as a very normal person who seemed to always be quite happy and really good socially. Another friend characterized him as outgoing and approachable, someone they would seek advice from, and who apologized when in the wrong. These testimonies presented a stark contrast to the violent behavior Todd exhibited on the night of June 12th. The psychological experts disagreed about Todd's level of remorse. Dr. Thomas suggested that while in custody, Todd had begun to comprehend the damage he had caused, showing some development of understanding about the impact of his actions. However, Dr. Ogloff presented a different assessment, noting that Todd had displayed profoundly disturbing behaviors following the murder, such as conducting internet searches related to rape and returning to the park.